Dudes and dudettes, how are you guys? This is Chazzy, and welcome back to What's the Damage, the good old WTD question mark here on my channel, the segment where I can unleash all of my inner rage and sadness and anger and sorrow, all of the negative emotions that come with being a human being in today's day and age, especially in today's day and age where everything is so woke and contrived and annoying and just freaking aggravating to deal with, And today's video is going to be a concept vlog, guys. In case you don't know, a concept vlog is a term that I coined on this channel where I just come here and talk to you guys with very minimal, if any, editing, because usually when I do pop culture stuff, I put in photos and clips and stuff, but these videos are like a way for me to just come here and, talk about things in a controlled environment that sometimes gets out of control depending on what the people say in the comment section, right? I'm going to talk about movies, right? Now, in case you guys don't know, but if you are familiar with the kind of content that I produce for this channel, it should be obvious that I am a cinephile, right? I love watching movies in any capacity, different genres, and I have always been in love with them. But in recent years, as recently as I would say maybe 3 years ago or so, I started to really get into cinema much more, and after I bought a smart TV and started watching multiple movies a day when I was on vacation, it became much more, ravenous, and I began using the Letterboxd app, which is made for movie lovers and whatnot. And according to the Letterboxd app, that I use very frequently, I have watched in my lifetime right now 1,623 movies in total, right? Could be a little more because I don't remember every single movie that I've watched in my lifetime, but the ones that I do remember and I that I marked there as watched, 1,623. And it's actually interesting because it may seem like a lot of movies, but I'm sure that there are those, obviously people who have lived longer than myself who have watched a lot more, but watching movies is not a competition, Just because I've seen, okay, well, what happened to the lighting? What the heck, man? Hold on, let me fix that for you. Fix that for you guys there. I think that looks a little better. Yeah, that's, I gotta pay attention to that. It doesn't always work out the way it should. But anyway, so, yeah. Sorry, I temporarily lost my train of thought there. Movies, right? Throughout my viewing experience, I have seen movies from all different walks of life, different time periods, right? I've watched movies from the 1910s, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, you name it. I've watched that. I have seen a few movies from at least every single decade that cinema has been existing, but of course the vast majority being more recent, but like for example, in the 1910s, I can recall having watched Frankenstein, the original, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, The Curious Case of one and the other, one of those two, I've seen, very few movies from back then, but I have at least seen a couple from each, old-timey period, right? And it's very strange because obviously cinema evolves over time, and movies become much better, but even though we have so much technology today that we can use to make amazing feature-length pictures, at the same time that they're getting better, they are simultaneously getting worse, It's almost like movies are trying to, each movie that comes out today is trying to pull itself in different directions, It's striving to be better, but it's also being worse at the same time, Whether it's unintentional or not. And me, for example, I have a very strong preference, an attachment, if you will, right, to the aughts, the early 2000s. So, the period of cinema from 2000 to 2009, that's where, in my opinion, the best movies were made, whether they're horror or action or comedy or romance. I'm also very attached to the 80s. I love 80s cinema. 90s also did produce quite a few gems, off the top of my head, from the 90s I can remember Titanic, The Shawshank Redemption, Pulp Fiction, right? So there are some movies there. Some of my personal favorites came from the 90s as well. We're talking about animation, Disney, Toy Story, my favorite Pixar movie ever. There was also A Bug's Life, right? But the 80s were really special, man. The 80s, I believe, even though I'm not an 80s kid, something about the 1980s, especially with movies and music, is very nostalgia, right? My favorite movie ever might just be The Karate Kid, which came out in 84. I believe it was 84, right? Or was it 83? No, that was Back to the Future. No, Back to the Future was 84. Okay, sometimes I'll get the years mixed up, but you know what I mean. There's something very special to me about the aughts, right? That's when my favorite movies as a child, as a teenager growing up and watching them came out as well. So now I've started to notice, throughout my time watching many different films that they are steadily starting to get worse. Like from, let's say, I don't know, 2019-ish, maybe 2020 onwards, right? A little bit before the pandemic, you know, almost every single movie that has come out from 2020 onwards has been steadily getting worse and worse, right? Now, there are a few, like, if you go a little bit before 2017, 2018, there were still a few really good gems, but I think that from this point onward, everything sucks because of two very, very, very annoying things, which is woke culture. Right? Those two words there are responsible for ruining cinema as we know it. You know, television itself, you know, I cannot watch TV shows anymore when it's just everything is pandering to, you know, whether the African American community or the gay community or the Asian community or this and that. Everything now is woke pandering. So that's why I think that movies are just sucking completely now. There's no more essence. There's no more life. There's no more story. You know, there's no more character development. There's no more world building. There's nothing. You know, the special effects still look really good, especially if you're doing, you know, fantastic hero movies like Marvel, DC, whatever, you know, Star Wars. That's fine. But when everything becomes pandering to minorities, the people who aren't represented feel a little left out. And not even just being left out, it's just we can't relate to this, you know, like if you're making a new television series, you know, or a feature-length film about, you know, a bunch of lesbian couples trying to, you know, work through their issues and prejudice and homophobia and this and that, how am I, being a heterosexual man, going to relate to this? You know, it's like you can't just, whenever you try to pander to one particular party, you're going to alienate those who are not in that particular party. That's just life. That's logic. Another specific subcategory within this topic that I'm covering right now is horror. You know, horror movies are just not scary anymore, right? They used to be terrifying, man, you know, but now lately they've been getting so predictable and dull, you know? I mean, it's like freaking, I don't know, man. Go back to the 60s, you know, you have, for example, Rosemary's Baby. I hated that movie, you know, but I can't deny that there was a lot of suspense there, you know? Go to the 70s, we got The Exorcist. The 80s, the onslaught of the freaking slasher movies, you know, like A Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, you know, take your pick. The 90s, we had some Japanese horrors, you know, like Ju-on and Ringu, the original ones that were remade in the 2000s, right, as The Ring and The Grudge. In the 2010s, we finally had the onslaught of the Conjuring universe, you know, the Conjuring verse, right, with Annabelle and stuff. So, but from in the 2020s, I can't think of one horror movie that I've seen that was anything less than lackluster, right? Nothing stands out, you know, nothing speaks, you know, scary, right? Like, it seems like every single movie that I've seen, you know, at least in recent years, from like 2021, 22 onward, you know, that's horror. None of them are scary. None of them are creative. None of them are unique. None of them are well written or well acted or well produced. Or everything sucks. The jump scares are obvious. They're predictable. They're not scary at all. You know, it's not a jump scare. It's a jump bore. You know, they're jump bores now, because like I was watching a horror movie some time ago, and I was commenting with another fellow cinephile, a friend of mine, that like I don't get scared by horror anymore, right? It just doesn't do it for me the same way that it used to. Like maybe it's because I've seen too many horror movies, and I'm desensitized to it, but maybe it's because the movies actually suck now. I know nothing can scare me. Like I can sit through a 2-hour-long horror movie that was made in recent years and just sit there and like not even react, you know when the jump scare will happen and not be scared by it. There was this thing that I saw recently, Things Seen and Heard with Amanda Seyfried, which is like a suspense thriller. It was one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life. There is no suspense, there are no thrills, there are no scares, nothing. Amanda Seyfried is one of my favorite actresses, and yet she sucked. You know, it's like, I don't know, man. Sometimes an actor, an actress, you know, they're good for a part. They may even do a good, they will have a good performance, but the movie around them just, you know, evaporates. There's no essence. It's just completely terrible. I don't understand anymore. And because Hollywood clearly has run out of ideas, you know, there are many reboots and remakes, which I'm going to get to later, and also all of this woke pandering nonsense, it's starting to make movies have less and less life to them. Even superhero movies, man. All of a sudden, Captain America is a black guy. I don't understand, you know, it's like in Star Wars. Don't even get me started on Star Wars, man. The accolade was so objectively terrible. Every other character was black, Asian, you know, and there's a lesbian couple. It doesn't make sense, man. This is, like I said, you're pandering just to a specific group of people, not anybody else, you know? Like Hollywood has historically gotten backlash for whitewashing, where they would cast a lot of white actors in roles and whatnot. Lately, that's been reversed. We have much more diversity, which is awesome. It's great. I am not against diversity, you know. What I don't like is woke pandering. I don't mind if there are like Black Panther, one of the greatest movies ever made, you know, an entire all-black cast. Awesome, great, freaking awesome. Crazy Rich Asians, man, an all Asian American cast. Awesome, great, you know. You're not forcing anything. You're not pandering. It's a movie that's made just for them. So people have the option not to watch it. But we can't have that option when you keep freaking shoehorning it into everything and making it so it's impossible to not see that in anything. I don't know, man. Gone are the days, you know. Gone are the days of Stanley Kubrick, Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, you know, friggin' Alfred Hitchcock. You know, I'm a pretty big fan of his movies, although I particularly gravitate towards Psycho and The Birds, you know, because those are my two favorites. You know, like he's the master of suspense in my opinion, right? You know, Steven Spielberg, you know, George Lucas, who sold everything to Disney at one point, you know, like these guys, like they're no longer as active as before. I don't think Spielberg has even directed a movie in a while, right? And there's also Quentin Tarantino, but Quentin still makes movies, but it's not the same, you know, as back in the 90s and 2000s, you know, with Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, and, you know, did he also direct Sin City? I don't think that was Quentin, was it? I don't remember, but anyway, you know, I don't know, man. It's really contrived. It's really hard to talk about this. You know, like the directors, they're just becoming less and less creative and less bold. You know, it doesn't feel the same. It's like, you know, cinema is becoming Nutella. You know, everything is soft now. It's just annoying as heck. You know, even M. Night Shyamalan, who is famous for his twist endings, right? Like M. Night Shyamalan, to me, his peak was with The Sixth Sense. You know, Lady in the Water was also pretty cool. I also like The Village. You know, like there are some movies of his that are really good, right? But like I recently saw Knock at the Cabin with Dave Bautista. Bro, like for one thing, it's M. Night Shyamalan. You already know there's gonna be a twist. You know, that's already how it works, you know? But you could see the twist coming from a mile away. There was very little suspense, very little surprise elements, you know, very little thrills. So it's really aggravating. But like I said, I have watched too many movies, so maybe lately I've been finding my way more towards YouTube to watch short films, you know, like on the Alter channel, which does horror, you know, and Omelito as well. But like, it's like, cause I'm trying to find something new, man. I'm trying to search for something that will entertain me, you know, shock me and wow me, you know, in ways that a movie hasn't done in a very long time. But it's becoming difficult to do that because everything sucks, you know? Nothing is the same anymore, you know? Romances aren't romantic, you know? They're just, you know, sappy, you know, and very predictable and forced, right? Horror is no longer scary. Action is no longer, you know, actiony. It's no longer entertaining. Thrillers are no longer thrilling, you know? Dramas are no longer dramatic. You know, everything is losing its essence, right? Which is why I find myself gravitating more and more towards the 90s and the 2000s, which are my two particular favorite era for cinema, you know? I watch international films. I love Korean cinema, right? But even that is getting kind of tough to watch lately, you know? Not necessarily because of wokeness, but just because it blends in, you know? Whatever. But still, remakes and reboots, I have a bone to pick with them as well, you know. There are many movies that aren't necessary to be remade, and Hollywood still does it anyway. They insist on trying to, you know, give a modern day vision to this kind of thing, you know, right? And obviously many, at least that I can recall, a lot of reboots and remakes are all about woke pandering crap, you know, so it doesn't really sit well with me anyway. Like there was, I believe that at some point they were going to remake Cujo. I think that Hollywood is in talks about remaking Cujo, which is a classic, you know, Cujo, man, classic 80s horror. I love the Stephen King novel and the movie that was adapted from it, you know. But you can be sure that if they remake Cujo, it's gonna be woke, you know. The dog is probably gonna be gay, you know, a cross-dressing. Maybe he's going to be a trans, he's gonna be a cat, or whatever, you know. They're going to insert that somehow. I don't know how, but they will. It's not going to be a mother and a son trapped in a car with Cujo outside. No, it's going to be a lesbian couple, you know, trapped in a car with Cujo outside. The cross-dressing Cujo. Jesus, man, everything is just... Hollywood is going off the rails, man. It's getting harder and harder to watch anything, you know, honestly. But whatever. You know, at least Disney is still somewhat okay on it. You know, I don't see too much of this pandering Disney movies, right? Although sequels aren't very good. You know, Frozen 2 was meh, Moana 2, yeah, I don't know. But anyway, guys, that's it. I think I've shared enough of my opinions. It's been about 15 minutes of recording time and the battery's getting low and I'm hungry as heck. I want to eat something, so I'm going to leave it at here, you know. Let me know what you guys think, you know, like what you think Hollywood is what you think about Hollywood and the direction they're going in. You know, there are a lot of new actors and actresses, you know, like everybody is acting really well. There are some who are beginning their career, you know, Timothy Chalamet, for example, Millie Bobby Brown, right? These are like, Timothy was recently nominated for, or even maybe even won an Oscar. I think he won or was just nominated for, I don't remember. You know, we've got Zendaya, Tom Holland, the next generation, you know, we're in good hands in terms of acting. It's just the directing and the producing, you know, the screenwriting, right? That's what I think really isn't being dealt with very well, you know. But maybe I'll talk about this in another video, you know. But for now, movies right now are getting worse. They suck. Let me know in the comments below if you agree, disagree, some of your favorite films, you know, and let's just see where this is gonna go, you know. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get attacked in the comments, you know, but maybe not. We'll see. If you guys happen to enjoy this video, please go ahead and give it a like and also subscribe to my channel because I release videos every single week. And while you're at it, hit the notification bell too so you can know exactly what time I upload it. It's all good. Go on over to my other channels as well. You got Chazzy Plus, Chazzy Cast, you know, BR. So bonus content, material, footage, and podcasts in English and Portuguese, excuse me. And that's it, guys. I'm gonna get going before I get even angrier. This is Chazzy signing out for now, and as always, I will see you guys in the next video. Roll the outro screen.